It's difficult to summarize the accomplishments that we as graduates have had in the last 4 years, because to get to where we are today, we did a lot. I think back to your first recursion lab, the first time you had to take an exam and write code on paper. Isn't that weird? You had to write code on paper. And for whatever reason, I have had at least 3 classes at this university that have had to deal with buses and like routing buses. I don't know what's up with that. But for whatever you've done and for whatever you're proud of, congratulations. Computer science is an interesting field when you start as an undergrad, and I think it's very unique in this way because there can be such a large gap of prior knowledge from student to student. I sat by freshmen who programmed dozens of mobile apps for fun in high school, little whiz kids. But then I sat by students who watched Hidden Figures and wanted to come to a programming class because they wanted to see what it was about. And that's a challenge for students and professors. How do you take students who are in such different places and make them feel on common ground? That's not something easy to do. And I really want to thank the professors that went the extra mile in those beginning classes to make students feel like they belong in computer science early on. For me, that was Dr. Shanna Waters in my 1133 Intro to Computer Science class. And I hope you had a Shanna Waters like I did, because that sense of belonging is so important. Computer science is an interesting field in a lot of other ways. It's a major that, at first glance, makes everyday people ask, well, is it really a science? A lot of my friends back at home still think that my major is about fixing computers, like I'm an IT guy. And while that might be difficult to explain a compiler to your grandmother, I think the breadth and the variety of our material is really a strength of our field. If you guys know Edgar Dijkstra, the guy behind Dijkstra's algorithm, who was really a big pioneer in computer science, he used to say that our field, that our computer science, should really just be taught as sort of a subsection of math. It was just its own branch of mathematics. And that might have been true at one point, back when computer science was just a bunch of old dudes with chalk. And there is quite a bit of math involved, maybe more than some of us wanted. I do think that computer science has grown past that definition. With the ubiquity of computers, the questions that computer scientists are asking have shifted. 50 years ago, researchers were asking questions like, what's the best way to sort a list? And now they're asking questions like, can we use robots to communicate with children at a very early age to find if they have autism? Or they're asking, can we learn about climate change using data from weather patterns to predict future catastrophes? Those are both University of Minnesota research projects, by the way. The difference here between modern computer science questions, the ones that we'll have to face, and those from the past is that now humans are part of the discussion. What began as a science literally contained in one big room now touches every human being on the planet. And that's very cool. It's very enterprising if you're graduating with a degree in computer science. But it might leave you wondering if it leaves you with some responsibility. And this question about the role of humanity in computer science isn't something that I have an answer for. I think Mats and Joe might have said it better than I did. But it does remind me of a similar question, which is perhaps the most unsolved question in computer science. Why do so many people feel like they don't belong in our major? And that might be a weird thing to get hung up on in a room full of graduates. Obviously, we all belong in computer science. But it's a question you've probably thought of before, and certainly your peers have thought of before in some form or another. And as computer science becomes more and more about answering questions about humans, it's something that we need to think about among us. This question shows up in a lot of ways. Maybe you were the only woman in an upper division class of 30 people, and you wondered how that happened. Maybe your professor is using Star Wars references to describe an algorithm, and you have no idea what they're talking about. Or maybe you didn't get a cool summer internship when all your friends did. Or a professor never got back to you about a research inquiry. These are real events that happen all the time that can make you feel alone or left out or behind in our major. And then we had a pandemic. And I'm sure that when the pandemic started, you were told by someone, well, all of your work is done on a computer anyway, so it's not like that much has changed for you. But it did change. It's a lot more difficult to stay involved in classes, to network with professors, and to keep up with your friends when it's all online. I met a lot of very kind, incredible people at this university through our major. And once we went online, it's been very tough to keep up with them. So while you might be feeling excited for graduating, and maybe relieved that you don't have to check Canvas for grades anymore, you also might be feeling like you have a degree, but you aren't really a computer scientist. You just sort of winged it. You're an imposter. And if you haven't heard of this before, this is called imposter syndrome. And it's everywhere in our major. It's an experience susceptible to lots of people for lots of reasons. Computer science is a very competitive field. It's very easy for some in computer science to wear their success on their sleeve. And many should. You know, there are so many incredible advancements that have been done in computer science here and everywhere. But if you ever feel like your peers have passed you up, like you've fallen short on your ambitions, and the world has passed you by, even though it's only the beginning, you know, we've just graduated, just know that that's a shared experience with lots of graduates, and with, you know, everybody feels like that sometimes. Our major is so broad that it is impossible for one person to reach all aspects of it. So there will always be someone who reached a goal that you haven't. There's just too many goals. And in a more general case, there are times in computer science when it feels like the sky's the limit and you can solve any problem until you take formal languages and automata theory and you learn that there are some problems that nobody can solve. But then there are days when it might feel like you can't do anything. You've forgotten everything. You can't program anymore. And that's because computer science is, at its heart, problem solving. It's difficult. It harbors the same aches and pains that cause writer's block and artist's block. And that's because, like art and like writing, programming requires creativity. You have to be creative to be good in computer science. So don't sell yourself short on your bad days when you're not feeling particularly creative. You'll fight through it. You always will. And you will have bad days if you haven't had 100 of them already. So be creative. Be persistent on the days when you're not creative. And perhaps, most importantly, be kind to your peers. Remember that people are only able to do their best when they feel like they belong. And we need people in computer science to feel like we belong, because we've got a lot of work to do.